Alex, good to meet you. You okay?
Yeah, very good.
James, really nice to see you.
So I'm really interested, and I know James will be the same, in sort of elite performance and understanding what allows you to get to, or have a chance to get into that sort of top 1 or 2% in what they do. But everyone has their own potential. So it'd be really interesting to understand what you feel the biggest barrier to an individual performing to their potential is.
Really good question. And obviously it's one that what I've played with, I suppose, and mused over for maybe 20 years now, 25 years. And really, to put it into one or two words, emotional regulation. Emotional regulation. So let's unpack that. Just so for the viewers, we can understand what that means. Emotional regulation. It means not being led by your emotions. It means you leading your emotions, you choosing how you want to feel. Imagine the freedom that gives you. But also there's a little thing which was developed really by a wonderful psychologist called Eric Byrne in the 50s, called transactional analysis. And he spoke about 5 ego states. And when we talk about ego, we're really talking about way of thinking, way of being, way of consciousness. And there are 5. People often think about the peacock ego state, says he in a throne. But people often say about the ego, and we need ego, right? We need it. But there are 5. And there's one called adult, which hopefully we're all in now, which is, we're all comfortable, we feel safe, and we're having an adult conversation. But then there's 2 others, child and parent, and then they split. And he said, his theory was with transactional analysis, the transaction is between the individuals communicating, and you can analyze that and you can control other people with your ego state. So depending what ego state I'm in, so for instance, at the moment I'm in adult, but if I suddenly go critical, controlling, parental, and I become like this, I'm going to quickly rub you up the wrong way. It's not going to take you long to not like me or not warm to me. If I suddenly start criticizing and saying, yeah, I'm not quite sure you're asking good questions, Alex. And that was a silly question to ask. Suddenly the whole feeling in the room changes. Or if I go into adaptive child ego state, which is people pleasing, which we also have a pandemic of, because that's kind of the one everybody resorts to when they have an imbalanced sympathetic nervous system. That means I'm seeking your approval. I laugh at jokes which aren't funny. I put your happiness before mine. Dangerous, really dangerous. You've got to put your happiness before everybody's. And that's, once again, another tip to the viewers. Put you first, get you happy, then everybody around you will be happy. Get you happy, and that makes the environment, everybody around. Too many people focus on making others happy. So to your question, emotional regulation, which leads to accountability. Accountability is absolutely imperative in order for you to perform at a high level. You've got to get up and train. And when you're emotionally regulated, you realize that. You've got objectivity. So you can look and know, I have to train. You realize the 10,000 hour rule. You realize that if I miss training today, somebody else who I'm competing against might be training double as hard. I'm going to fall behind. You recognize that in order to achieve things, I have to put effort in. Ownership, maturity, these are all parts. And some would say, really to become an adult, what defines an adult, what defines a man or a woman, is somebody who's emotionally regulated and emotionally mature. And I would say, to take that further, how to become an elite performer in your field, whatever that is to take those fundamentals and I guess use them to the extreme. So extreme accountability. And also have a plan, have a smart plan. What do I mean by smart? Anybody who's in business, I'm sure the viewers will know. Smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. Have a smart roadmap of what you want to achieve. Make sure it links in with your goals and objectives, but most importantly with what you love. And that's once again to do with emotional regulation. People, when they're not emotionally regulated, make bad decisions. They choose careers to please other people. Daddy or your mum wants you to be a doctor, so you spend 5 years at medical school and you hate every second of it. Because really you want to go and you might want to become a dancer or a musician. In order, I think, to be truly great, and we look at the likes of Muhammad Ali, we look at Conor McGregor in modern day, we look at Messi, we look at Ronaldo, we look at the real greats. Let's look at the top echelon. Muhammad Ali is a great example. Conor McGregor is a great example. Belief. And that leads us really nicely into what I think is the one word that dictates most of our conversation today, and that's stories. The stories we tell ourselves about ourselves.
So with belief's a fascinating one. So is it a case of, can you quickly fake it to make it and sort of create that belief, forcing it almost? Or do you have to go through a journey of unpacking limiting beliefs and going through that whole process to live belief genuinely? What's the difference between those two sort of ways of working?
Yeah, so there are two ways, aren't there, of moulding a sheet of metal. You can hit it with a hammer, or you can stick it in a fire. Right, so you can beat it. You can do a Conor McGregor, and if you look at his documentary, Notorious, I believe it's called, you look at that. He just trained religiously. He's in the kitchen, walking around getting his dinner, and he's moving, and he's constantly obsessing over it. And maybe that's part of his character trait. And that also comes back to what makes somebody elite. Maybe there are obsessive compulsive elements to their character. So there's a little bit of nature and nurture mixed in here, and we need to be careful that it's not all about nurture. There's a bit of nature. Some people are genetically slightly different. But here's the thing. He's using his, David Beckham the same. He's using his, what could be considered as a disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, forget the disorder, is obsessive compulsive to be outstanding. He's used his negative to a positive.
And so that's the interesting thing about modern society, potentially modern medicine, and the way in which it's labelled.
Yeah.
OCD.
Correct.
Is, in my opinion, based on especially the way you've just described it, is a problem in the way in which it's framed.
Yeah.
Because to be an obsessive compulsive character, harnessed in the right way, can lead to greatness.
Agreed.
So why, therefore, does the D need to apply? Why do we need to have the disorder attached?
Or just reframe it to obsessive compulsive drive or something like that.
Good reframe.
Yeah.
Good reframe. So my book, another plug there, I'm afraid, but Procrastinate to Perform. Procrastination is telling yourself a story to avoid doing something. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And do you know what? Actually, today I'm not feeling well. Or if I do it tomorrow, I'll do it better. Or you make up stories to suit. Well, guess what? We can make up stories to make us do things. Mm-hmm. So look at Muhammad Ali, look at Conor, look what they say. Look at Tyson Fury, who has bravely come out and admitted his mental health issue, which has helped millions of people. And I admire that. It's helped millions because there's nothing to be ashamed of here. I believe in mental health issues, and there are massive issues with mental health, but a lot of it is the environment and the shame that people carry because they think differently and feel differently. When in fact, you can use it to your advantage. Yeah. Tyson does that brilliantly. He uses it to his advantage because he needs to train. So he trains obsessively. And that's a wonderful thing.
It's a fascinating topic because, like you've said, you've got a book that's coming out very soon, Procrastinate to Perform. And I suppose that again comes down to reframing the story you tell yourself. If you are someone who is known to procrastinate and you tell yourself that you procrastinate, then you are essentially framing that as a negative. But the idea and the concept behind your book is that you can procrastinate to perform. You
Correct.
can rewire the story, obsess the story into, okay, I'm going to procrastinate now because it's going to get me ready.
Right.
And I'm now going to procrastinate and therefore perform.
Right. And you're rewiring.
Absolutely.
Neuroplasticity is kicking in again.
Yeah.
So listen, don't forget, you are, it says in the Bible, once again, I'm not religious. I don't subscribe to any religion, possibly Buddhism, and that's a philosophy. But we're talking here about, it says in the Bible, man is a god unto himself, and women, they're gods to themselves. We're gods to ourselves. We can create our future. Yeah. We create our futures by knowing what we want, knowing exactly what we want, being aligned to what we truly want and love. Passionate about something, and that can't just be a random thing like I just want to be rich, I just want to be famous. No, let's be specific. Back to SMART goals, and then let's really begin to map that out. What does that look like? What does my character look like? Wealthy, successful, doing really well. What does a Stephen James Copp look like being successful? Well, he looks like somebody sat in a gold throne beside a fire in the summer, sweating, doing a video. I saw that. And I saw that, sadly, because I lost my son. My son was killed in a car accident. And it took me months, and the trauma of that broke me through to suddenly realization I can use his death for good. I can spend the rest of my life wallowing that I've lost my son and be that guy who everybody said, poor guy, he lost his son, his 18-year-old son. No. I'm not. My son was better than that. No. I'm going to use that. And I'm going to use him in coaching sessions. Alex, we've used him before. I'll use him as an example. I'm going to use that trauma to ignite me, to put that second booster on my rocket.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I went to an event in November, and Mo Gaudat was the headline speaker, and he talks about his son and how he was the chief business officer at Google X and had this what would be deemed probably the second best job in the world. But he wasn't happy, and now losing his son was almost his ignition to change the way he looked at life, and his mission is to make 1 million people happy. And
Fantastic.
when you sit and listen to him, you think, it's a fascinating story. The guy, the intellect, the way he delivers his message, it's just
brilliant.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Inspirational, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Inspirational.
And as you said earlier, trauma can, I don't know whether you agree with this or not, but I do firmly believe that every decision we make, there's an A and a B choice.
100%. There's a fork.
There's a fork in the road in every decision.
Everyone.
And it leads you to the next step in your journey.
And if you're regulated, you're more likely to take the right decision.
Yeah. Because you'll make an informed decision,
objective,
decision.
a calm decision.
Yeah. You said earlier there's 5 ego states.
Yeah.
You've mentioned adult, parent, child.
Yeah.
What are the remaining 2?
So the remaining 2 are the parent and child split into 2 each.
Okay.
And there are subdivisions, arguably, and different people, psychologists will say different things. But really, there are only 5. So adult top. Then there is parent and child, and then parent and child split into 2. On the child side, we have what's called free child. And I always emphasize that to my clients. Find your free child. You're told all of our childhood, grow up, stop being silly, grow up. But actually, we're at our happiest when we're kids. And most of us kind of spend our lives trying to get back there. I love fly fishing, for instance, because it's joyous, it's fun. I love meeting up with my friends. It's great fun. You need to laugh. Find your free child. Find the thing you love without any pressure, without any stress. It could be playing Ludo. I love playing with my 7-year-old daughter, Minky. We'll often play a board game or something, and I adore doing that with her. Find your free child. So there's free child. That's a healthy ego state. But obviously, it's not practical in most situations. I can't sit with a client with severe trauma and be in free child, because they're going to think I'm not taking them seriously, and I'm not going to appear competent or be competent. So there's free child. Use that. Please don't lose it. Most people lose it. And they grow old and grumpy and negative. Grow old disgracefully and with a free child and laughing. Then there's the second bit of the child, which is adaptive child. And this is the real troublemaker of the bunch.
People pleaser. That
people pleaser. And that's somebody who's grown up in an environment which they've tried to create an element of peace. There might be somebody causing chaos, a sibling, a parent in the family, and they're the peacemaker. And they're always putting everybody else's happiness before their own. But the problem is it triggers other ego states. So the interesting thing about ego states is they trigger ego states in other people. So we think by being a people pleaser, by agreeing with everything you say, James, I'm going to be successful in life, you're going to like me. Not true. What's the first main trait, the FTSE 100 chief executives? The first main, most important trait of the FTSE 100 chief executives. One thing, and mostly predominantly in male, and it's why females only account for, I think, 3 or 4% of the FTSE 100.
Ruthlessness?
Ruthlessness, similar. Disagreeableness. We don't agree. Competitiveness. And that's more predominant in a male, and I'm not in any way being sexist. Most of the best people I've ever worked with have been female. Really good. But if you look at the FTSE 100, look at the chief execs, predominantly male, because most men at that level are very disagreeable. i.e. you've got to really get it right. They won't just agree with you for the sake of it. They won't smile at your joke unless it's genuinely funny. And that builds really meaningful relationships because people start to trust you. They trust your opinion. When I work with Alex, if he asks me a serious question, I'm going to give him the honest answer. I once worked with a very high profile celebrity and he's a singer, and he had a panic attack while doing a gig and was speaking to me, and his manager called me and said, I've got a problem. The guy won't go on stage. He's in bed, he's refusing to leave his room. Can you speak with him? And I phoned him and we had a chat, and I said, okay, I'm going to tell you one thing. You're not going to like it, but I'm going to tell you. Nobody's coming to save you. And he went mad. He said, I'm going to sue you. Went crazy. We left it for 2 weeks. He came back in 2 weeks. He said, you've changed my life. He wasn't taking accountability for the fact that, okay, you had a panic attack, but that's okay. I've had panic attacks when I was young. It's all right. He took accountability for his own health. The reason why he was in bed is he went into child. He wanted somebody else to take that pain away, a mum or a dad or a parental figure. So that's the child side. On the parental side, we have nurturing adult, nurturing parent. And that's typically what we're like when we're with our children. Sometimes, and we need to be more like that with ourselves. I often say to my clients, be gentle with yourself, because nobody else will. Be gentle with yourself. That doesn't mean that you're not a man. It doesn't mean that you're not a woman. Just be gentle with yourself as you work through this process of transformation, right? But the next ego state is as difficult as the adaptive child, and that's critical and controlling parental ego state. Now that one really pairs up nicely, but actually it's a negative connection. Adaptive child, critical and controlling ego, parental ego state. What that is typical old school management. You seek approval. When you seek approval, you're an adaptive child. In the old school, as a director, you wouldn't give, as a managing director or a sales director, they would look at you and you would give no feedback, no positive feedback. I'll be critical. As I'm looking at you now, I'll say, hi James, what's your target? If you hit your target, no, right, get back out and do your target. And you would want to please that director. When I first left university many decades ago, and things have changed, thank God. There's more effective ways to manage. But back then, it was about wanting to please your line director, your line manager. So they never gave you approval. And they were taught this. There were courses teaching it. They just didn't quite understand the science behind it. Don't give approval. Never give approval. Even when they're on target, never give approval.
Always ask for more.
Because every boy always wants, and girl, always wants their daddy's approval. So be the daddy, the parent. Very powerful. So we're beginning to learn a little bit, and this is quite complex, and I'm not an expert in this field, but we can easily see how we can not only control our own emotions, which just takes us to a whole new level, we can control people around us in a positive way. Yes, it can be used in a negative way, but that's not what my job is here to do. My job is to get people to control their environment in a way that's positive and engaging, and also aligned with what their goals and objectives are.
So we've touched on sort of the peak and where people need to get to reach their potential is emotional regulation. So that's sort of often where people need to get to.
Yeah.
You obviously work with people, high performing people,
Yeah.
People that have reached a very high level in what they do.
Yeah.
But maybe some of them still need to master emotional regulation.
Completely agreed.
What's the raw ingredient, would you say, that, you can look across all the people you work with that has got them to that point, even the ones that don't yet have the emotional regulation? Is there a raw ingredient that has allowed people to get to the top of or near the top of what they're doing?
Trauma.
Yeah. Okay.
Trauma. Yeah. In one word, trauma. I think you suspected that would be the answer. In my experience, that's not every clinician's experience. I'm not a clinician, by the way, but that's not everybody's who works in my field coach's experience. But for me, it's been trauma. I think some people are motivated, some people are driven, and some people are motivated by fear, trauma. Old school management. Some people are motivated by emotion. I want to buy my family a big house. I want to get out of this place. I want to be liked. Most people will say, I want to be a celebrity. Why? I don't know. They never really thought about it. They just want to be a celebrity. That's not good enough. We need to narrow that down.
Very interesting. Talking about the ego states, we've talked about adult, parent, child, and the two variations within parent and child. So I think it leads quite nicely on to one of the other big hitting questions that we wanted to pose your way. How do we breed the next generation of peak performers? Alex, myself, Dave, Rod, and Ian are the pack members. We've all got young families. How do we breed the next generation of peak performers?
So I can answer this from a personal perspective and also a professional perspective. So I've got a 7-year-old and a 34-year-old, and I'm divorced, and I'm trying to bring up my 7-year-old. I co-parent. And what I've noticed is a big difference between both. One's called Sasha, one's called Minky. Is the older one, when she was young, I gave her everything, and I was soft and gentle, and I helped her with every task I could. And as she grew old, she struggled with her self-confidence. I'm sure she won't mind me sharing that now. She's now a brilliant paramedic, and I'm so proud of her. I adore my girls. and she's found her self-confidence. She's worked it out. She's done the graft. She got through. Not everybody gets through. The best thing you can do to your children, this is not going to be popular, is do not help them. Do not help them. Let them struggle. They need to understand a little bit of struggle. In a controlled, safe environment, we need to see a bit of struggle. Let me define struggle. Let them, if they start something, finish it. If they're doing a job and they say, I can't do this, too hard, a bit of Lego, or they're painting a picture, they say, can you do this for me, Daddy? Can you do this for me? So no, I think you can do that yourself. This is where we get self-esteem from. And self-esteem is one of the magic ingredients. We grow up with self-esteem, we can build meaningful relationships. We can build meaningful relationships, we can develop really, really fast.
I think this is a powerful point and one we've discussed before. I mean, I do things with my kids now, like, when they go and get their pajamas, I make sure that they're inside out the wrong way, and they have to like turn them inside out, little things like that. It can be as little as that, in my opinion. But I suppose it's always hard, isn't it? Because you can control setting those challenges yourself, but then there's many other people potentially in their life that will contradict that and make it a little bit more comfortable for them. So you've got to, you can't really control everything. But yeah, I've tried to take that to heart as much as possible.
Self-esteem is built upon accomplishment of tasks, full stop. Losing is growing, is learning. Weakness is winning, full stop. And I think we need to reframe all of these things. We're no longer initiated. There's a thing, Carl Jung, a word he used called puritanis, means eternal child. A lot of men now, we have a problem, are growing up, and we've got a lot of man children out there. And I'm sure any ladies watching can relate. But guys who just can't regulate, who just can't seem to be accountable because they've never overcome anything. They've never really managed to generate and complete tasks for themselves. There's a lot to be said. It's why confidence in successful men, it's why successful men is very attractive. People often think it's the money. It's not, and often females will think it's the money. It's not the money. It's the confidence and the accountability and the competence that people find really, not just as a relationship, even as a friendship. It's very, very, very very magnetizing. And it's where charisma comes from, adversity. When somebody stands up and they've really achieved, not been given, not inherited, they've achieved. That's a really alluring, really magnetic, really charismatic aspect of their character, which people will just be drawn to from all walks of life.
And I think this is, how you say things as well. If someone does something that they have achieved themselves, saying, you should be proud of yourself rather than I'm proud of you. It sort of all lends into that sort of feeling of self-satisfaction. I mean, is one of the tips here that if you want to breed the next generation of peak performers, you have people that help you, whether that be parents, in-laws, family members. Is it sitting with them and just saying, look, we all need to be on the same page Absolutely. Here? Do you think that's important?
That's creating that environment. And go back to the fish analogy. And also I want to talk about words. Manage the words around. There's a reason why spelling is called spelling, because you derive the word spell. Words are spells. They cast spells on us, right? It's really interesting. Start understanding language and spelling and spell. Because what we're really doing, every time we're telling ourselves something, we are casting a spell upon ourselves. If I say, I can't do that, you won't achieve that. If I say, today that's been too hard for me, but I'm going to come back tomorrow and try again, that's a different spell. So manage the words and the environment and how people interact with our children and the language they use. Hence the very famous Dad, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Very famous book. How children grow up with a successful parent and how they grow up with different expectations and they become successful or not, dependent upon their environment.
It all goes full circle though, doesn't it?
100%.
You spoke about your upbringing and the environment in which you grew up and what have you. And there were a lot of, I noted down, limiting beliefs. They were everywhere.
Massive.
You were surrounded by them.
Massive.
The dyslexia, the way you were labelled the way you were. Then your parents saying, don't be silly, don't go to university. People from this village don't go to university. And all these really, 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 I guess, imprisoning limiting beliefs.
Chains.
Chains, these anchors. And you actually said it just now, Alex, and it really resonated. I wrote it down. instead of the I am proud of you, like, it's really landed with me. You should be proud of yourself, because to say I am proud of you means that you're going to be reliant on my
Approval. Correct.
And therefore, you're very much going to fall into that adaptive child state.
Called codependency.
Yeah. And so just that simple reframing of language is so powerful.
Language is everything.
And as you say, language is so powerful.
They're spells. Spelling.
Yeah.
Right? They're spells. It's juju.
Okay, so the title of the podcast and what we're doing is Project Peak Performance. Have you ever personally had a peak moment or your peak moment, and what did it feel like afterwards?
So it's funny you should ask that. You remember we've just been speaking about ego states. I said 5. And I've always believed there's a 6th. And some would say there are sub-ego states, but there's a 6th, or an ego state which transcends all the ego states, which has no state. So it's basically no ego, completely egoless. And it's hard to find, and I've believed in this, I've read about it, it's almost mythical. 27th of March this year, I was skiing in Austria, and I got there late, the snow dried up, the lift shut down, spent a day deciding to climb the mountain. So I climbed the mountain and got to the top of the mountain in my salopettes, just a t-shirt, and it was 20 degrees. So I was absolutely sweating. The fluids I lost were ridiculous. My heart was doing 145 for 3 hours, which, is not bad for an old guy like me. But here's the rub. Usually there are slides that come down the mountain. They're big metal tubes and you can slide down them. You do 50 yards and they were shut because the season hadn't started for the walking. So I had to walk down another hour and a half. So at the end of the day, I'd done 4.5 hours walking, lost a lot of fluid, a lot of electrolytes, and I follow a ketogenic diet, so my electrolytes I have to keep in check. Anyway, long story short, that evening I woke up at midnight in my apartment and my heart was doing 162 beats a minute. I'd gone into an arrhythmia, and I've studied arrhythmias to quite a deep understanding, in as much as, it's linked to the sympathetic nervous system, and I understand the different types of arrhythmias, and I recognise on my watch, because I'm not promoting Apple or anything, but they can do ECGs now. So I did an ECG and my heart was in an arrhythmia, and it was atrial flutter, not atrial fibrillation. And that can be a silent killer. It's quite dangerous. It can cause blood clots after a couple of days if untreated. But if you get it treated, it can be quite good. So I drove to hospital and they took me to a ward. Now, something I haven't said throughout this entire podcast, and I have an admission to make, is I'm really resolved in life now. I'm in a very happy place. There's nothing I fear. I've never been happier. I have everything I could ever dream of, my wildest dreams. But I have one fear, one recurring nightmare. I wake up and it's anesthetics because of that PTSD I had when I was 21 that never got treated. Now I teach my clients to walk towards fear. Walk towards fear. Every day find something you're scared of and do it. And suddenly I'm in hospital and they offer me 3 treatments for this heart issue. My heart's doing 162 and he's saying to me, you're going to die at some point. If you leave this and go away, you could get a blood clot, you're going to get a stroke, you're going to die. Or your heart will be damaged. But I can offer you 3 treatments. One, you can go home, and in Austria, that's an option. I can go home, but you will die eventually. Number 2 is we can give you a medicine that will convert you. Well, number 3, we can use the electrocardial conversion, the paddles, the electric shock you, and that will turn you back into the right rhythm. But that needs an anaesthetic. And he said, I'm going to leave it with you for 2 hours to think about. And I sat there and thought, well, I'll take the medicine, avoid the anaesthetic. But then a thought came over me. How disingenuous would that be to all my clients if I walked away from my biggest fear? I spent 20 years teaching people to walk towards fear, embrace fear, fear is a friend, overcome fear. That's what makes you grow, adversity and fear. And there I am faced with my biggest fear. It's horrific, terrified. I can't walk away from it, to the point that I realized if I walk away from this fearful moment, I'm going to have to shut up shop and not practice and become a stripper or something. So I decided the greasy pole's not for me. I've got to do it. From the moment I signed consent and ticked that box of the anaesthetic, it was over. What I call the 6th ego state, and that's my 2nd book, due to be released in 2 months. The 6th ego state, I believe, I'm calling it that, and lots of psychologists I'm sure will correct me. It's just my phraseology. the sixth ego state kicked in, I was egoless. I had completely no fear. They came, the anaesthetist came, the room was full of doctors and medics. On this side, I had the consultant, this side, the anaesthetist. She said to me, and I won't say on this podcast what she said.
This comes with a PG.
Okay, so the name of the book follows my last word. I was so relaxed, I felt euphoric. No drugs for me, by the way. No sedative, nothing at all. Before she put the anaesthetic in, she said, are you ready? Bearing in mind, 34 years I've lived in terror of an anaesthetic. The only thing, I've overcome everything. The death of my son, not that you ever overcome that, but I've used it positively to keep his name going. Many traumas and difficulties and divorces. And the one thing still there is that. And there came the moment. And I wanted to know, how am I going to be when my moment comes and I've got to face my biggest fear? Am I going to hyperventilate? Am I going to faint? And am I going to cry? And none of those things matter if that's your thing. How will I react in my true moment of fear? And I reacted. It was completely peaceful. I went into this sixth ego state through some of the methodologies I put together and taught myself, some of the studies I've undertaken. And the last words when she said to me, just before she injected, she said, are you ready for this now? Was, fuck it, just stick it in. And I'm afraid, boys, that's the name of the book. And if that offends anybody, then I apologise. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be disruptive. It's meant to people to realise we need to face our fears. There is growth, such bliss in embracing our fears. It went perfectly well. I woke up. You could give me 20 anaesthetics now, I wouldn't mind. I feel great. That's it. I am clear. There is nothing on my mind left. So that was and that happened this year, 27th of March. I'll never forget it. It was a beautiful moment. And yeah, very, very, very inspirational for me.
Got your closure.
It's the full, and the cover of the book has got a ring, and it's kind of the completion of the circle. It's the full completion, which takes you all the way around. So that for me really was the epitome of my life's work. In that moment, it made everything all worthwhile, everything.
So Stephen, you've been really generous with your shares, your insights, your life, and the various moments that have led you to the place you're in now. What would you say is going to be your next peak moment? What are you working towards as your next peak moment?
That's kind of really easy to answer, and it wasn't originally, because I know you said to me what questions you were going to ask today, so I kind of knew what, but I give this some real thought. But actually, it's really quite easy, and it's when you see that moment in somebody's eyes, and suddenly they have a realization of something I've said, and I've transformed a little bit of their life, and that to me is a peak moment. The next client that I change, the next client whose life I impact in some way, it might only be small, it might be huge, but I transform their life. Seeing that in their eyes, and they suddenly get it. There's a new synapse, there's new neurons, there's new pathways, new belief systems. Suddenly they go, I can be something different. I can be better. And I did that. And that's with every client. And that for me is it doesn't get better. It doesn't get better. That's the only reason now I do it. It's the only reason I do it.
Looking to create that next aha moment for somebody. Absolutely.
And it happens with every client. It happens with every client. Alex, I'm sure you've had your moments through our time together over a couple of years where you've suddenly, it's dropped, the penny drops on it could be some kind of concept. Could be I know you put some brilliant courses together based on some of the conversations we've had, but your own thoughts. You've had moments.
Yeah, I think part of the reason for coming to you was not sort of necessarily fixing something. It was, enhancing. I was aware that I was coming to the start of leading people, being in a more senior position. I wanted to make sure I was able to keep progressing, keep maximising that opportunity. And I think just sort of being able to initially bounce situations, ideas off someone that's maybe been there and done it and can look at it from a different lens was really, there was lots and lots of things early on where it just made sense and it was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And then over time, for me, it's just been around feeling just so comfortable in my own skin, like just having that belief that I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
But there's more in there, and I will get there.
Yeah.
And it's just it's just having that sort of self-belief, that self-assurance, and that confidence in myself has just been just a constant progression in terms of working together.
And I think just to sort of top and tail this whole conversation, which has been a real pleasure today, guys. Thanks so much for coming and speaking to me. But is that, you know, we know that when Navy SEALs train and when people ring the bell, people drop out, people give up often at 40%, 40%, 40%, right? So I'm not saying you can perform at 100%. This is a unicorn, 90%. Anybody telling you that these are unicorn moments? These are emergency moments where you're saving your life. But people can perform at 60%, 65 or 70%. Huge change of life. And it's all to do with the stories we tell ourselves, the tools and the techniques we use, the people we speak to, our belief systems, but most importantly of all, and I'll come back to it again, is that regulation of our sympathetic nervous system. Just being composed. Being composed.
And I think one of the things you said quite recently to me actually was, you know, obviously failure, we talk a lot about failure being opportunities for learning and reframing that, but you defined failure recently to me as stopping or giving up.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if something happens that doesn't quite go your way, but you keep going and you adapt and you learn, then that's progress.
I couldn't agree more.
Stop, give up that's failure.
Not an option. Yeah. And there's no need ever to stop. We might be literally crawling a millimetre a year, progressing a millimetre a year. As long as we're progressing, we're still growing, we're still winning. For me, losing, failing is an opportunity for growth. Winning is losing. So kind of get your heads around that. To me, when you win, winning is losing because you've won. Once you perceive you've won, you're not going to go looking for growth. That's it. You're done. So winning for me is losing. Losing is an opportunity to grow. Yeah. So I embrace fear. I embrace opportunity. I see it as an opportunity. And I embrace what other people perceive as weakness. And I've got them. I'm flawed, as we all are. It's a human condition. But embrace it and use it and reframe it and see where it fits in your life. It's just a piece of jigsaw puzzle that's in the wrong place. That's all it is. But it fits in that picture somewhere.
I think one of the major takeaways that I've had from spending some time with you today, Stephen, is the way you can take very complex concepts. The brain isn't a simple mechanism, but you then explain them in a very digestible, understandable, enjoyable way. You're a fantastic storyteller, and I think, but people learn through story, right? So
we learn through metaphors and stories.
Absolutely,
as children.
Yeah, absolutely. So it takes us back to our childhood.
Once again, childhood, the loop.
So it wasn't intended. You've naturally segued me to the question, and that question is, with a man of your talent, I suppose, to help people find their true authentic selves and really, really develop themselves, is there a way that skill set could be transferred into helping children and the younger generation? And that's really, really important, as you can probably tell from some of the questions we've asked. You know, we're, the guys that run this project, we're all family men, leading businesses and what have you, but our children are obviously at the core of, for many of us, the reason why we are doing what we do. So is it possible to take this and make it a bigger opportunity for a younger generation? It's great that us in our 30s and 40s are able to have access to someone like yourself and learn, but how do we get people like you in front of younger audiences?
Yeah. So I think first of all is to get people like me in front of younger audiences. I think schools, and I'm a passionate believer, and in fairness, some good schools are. They're introducing lessons in emotional regulation. They're talking about feelings. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. Boys, men, didn't talk about feelings.
You didn't have them in the 70s.
We didn't have them. There was no such thing. But now they're talking about feelings, and they're talking about how they feel, and understanding that these are like clouds, that they're transitory, they're things you move through, and you have a choice. So I think we've begun that journey, but I would certainly like to see more. I'm currently looking and partnering with a company, or a couple of companies at the moment, to develop a virtual headset, so a virtual reality headset, like a game, and it's called The Journey, where people go into it and they go on a voyage of emotion, and the islands are emotions, different emotions. So literally for $24.99 for this voyage, for a headset, a child could actually explore different emotions and understand how beneficial they could be to their life in a fun way, in a play way. We need children to play with emotions.
In the free child state.
And the free child state. And that includes fear. We need exposure to fear. We need initiation. In certain tribes in Africa and on the Pacific, you know, they expose children to fear. They have masks on the wall of lions, and at 13 they go, ah, and they've got to chase off the lion. They initiate the child. to expose them to a little bit of fear. I don't think we have that anymore in the West. We can protect our children too much.
Yeah.
That's not to say we put them in a place of harm,
No.
but I think a little bit of fear, exposure to fear, and a little bit of understanding that's just another emotion, regulates that sympathetic nervous system again.
So naturally looking for that balance yet again of
100%.
fear but safety.
Always safe,
Yeah.
always in a safe way, but they don't know that.
No.
They don't know that. The monster under the bed, I want you to check if that monster's really under the bed, because actually it's not. It's not. It's in your head. It's not under the bed.
Brilliant. You have 3 books coming out very soon.
I do.
Do
in
we
the
have
next
an
couple of
official
months.
date?
No, not at the
Just
moment.
yet.
So they're being edited. They're going through. It's taken me years. And ironically, I couldn't finish the last chapter of 2 of them until this thing in March happened, this moment for me. There was some psychological block that was stopping me. I didn't feel authentic because I hadn't completed my circle. I still had a fear. So I still had a problem. How can I write a book to clients? And how can I sell a book and give something of value unless I can say with absolute authenticity, I've overcome this. I've done the full circle. So not only academically do I understand it, but I've lived it. I've had the panic attacks. I've had the imposter syndrome. I've had the insecurity. I've had all of that. And I've come out the other side and I understand that it's okay to be scared. It's all right to be scared.
So we'll obviously promote the books when they come out, but if anyone's suffering from writer's block, or if they're wanting to get in touch with you for in any way, what's the best way for them to do that?
Go to my website, which is www.stephen, spelled with a PH, not a V, -james.co.uk. Or you can email me direct on sjc@stephen-james.co.uk, and I'll get back to you just as quick as I can.
Stephen, it's been an absolute pleasure.
James, you too, you too.
Thank you, Stephen.
Alex, great.